Welcome to Adventure in Art. My name is Ben Staley, your resident talking head. I made another film. I can't stop. I can't stop shooting stuff with this new GH7. Actually, the camera's still not released and I'm still making films with it. I guess by the time you see this, it will have been released. Let's get into it. This is Mark McBride. He's one of my oldest friends. When I moved to California, I wanted to make movies. I wanted to tell stories. I didn't have any technical knowledge at all. I hadn't been to school. I had a Hi8 video camera. There was no YouTube. There was no easy way to learn stuff. The technology was really clunky. There was like maybe Final Cut Pro version 1. Mini DV video wasn't really even a thing yet. This is a long time ago. I'm freaking old, okay? I wanted to make stuff though. I had all these ideas. I had all these ambitions. Through a rock climbing buddy, I met Mark McBride. And at the time, this is early 2000s, he was a professional yo-yoer. Yes. Mark is actually one of the most famous professional yo-yoers in history. He's written books. He's toured the world as a professional yo-yoer. When I met him, he had a Canon XL1 and he had Final Cut Pro 1 or 2, and he was traveling around the world making yo-yo videos. Mark was a filmmaker. He had been to film school. He's very talented. He was sort of a do-it-yourself, kind of figure it out. He had this kind of homemade punk rock aesthetic. He would make his own backpacks. He would make his own films. It was pretty cool. So Mark and I became friends. We kind of teamed up. We made a whole bunch of little short films together. It was really that friendship, in a large part, that kind of showed me that you can do all this stuff yourself. And this was when it seemed out of reach to be able to do that. Early on, he was just someone that I saw was doing it. And I just kind of thought, oh, maybe I can do these things and I don't need a lot of help, or I just need a couple friends and I can still make things of pretty good quality. There's no question that had I not become friends with Mark early on, maybe I wouldn't have had the same career trajectory. Maybe I would have. You never know, how things would have turned out, but in my mind, he was instrumental. This is Steve Brown. He is one of Mark's oldest friends, and they were professional yo-yoers together. They used to tour the world together. They were on the Warp Tour and performing yo-yos on stage. They made a bunch of yo-yo videos all over the world. They're both kind of legendary, formerly professional, famous yo-yoers. So I've known Steve, tangentially for well over a decade. Steve is awesome. Him and Mark both kind of have different styles. I can't get into it. I don't really know the yo speak, but they both do different things. They're both responsible for creating their own kind of style of yo-yoing that has influenced the youth of today. And I think there's probably, tons of kids, they would say this, there's tons of kids nowadays that are way better yo-yoers. Anyways, that's the yo history. Mark and Steve got together with a couple more current yo-yoers. The mission was to kind of do a throwback video like they used to do, 15, 20 years ago. They were running around LA for 3 or 4 days and shooting all this stuff. I was busy, I wasn't really involved. Mark was actually shooting it on an old a Sony camcorder that was, I think, 15 years old or something. I knew this was happening and I was busy, but I offered to come out and help maybe shoot some really fancy B-roll or maybe some stuff. You know how, like in Jackass, it's pretty lo-fi, the TV show especially, even the films, they're really just shooting it with, video cameras, and it's of course bigger budget. But at the beginning of the films, they have this super high production value cold open. And they probably spend more on the cold open than they do on the whole rest of the frickin' movie, and the cold open's like 5 minutes. I suggested that maybe I try and use a modern camera and shoot something a little more high-end. Not gonna match Jackass, of course, for their cold open. So I had this newly, still unreleased GH7, and I had this anamorphic lens. The camera will do 240 frames a second in HD. And I thought, oh, okay, if I take an HD image, I shoot 240 frames a second, I got this 1.5 squeeze anamorphic, so then I can stretch it out. I have a slightly bigger than HD image. That could be pretty cool. And I've never shot yo-yoing before, but I think yo-yoing at 240 frames a second would be pretty cool. Yeah, so that's the genesis of the little film, and I had this idea, and we only had a couple hours. We arrived like an hour and a half, 2 hours before sunset, went to Sepulveda Dam. I started shooting. I just want really high dynamic range, Arri Log C3. What I love about this, and I didn't realize it would be, you know, sort of a thing, but with this kind of bleached out concrete, I shot a lot of these kind of low angles where I laid on the ground and I shot up at their face, but the sun is beating down and then it just reflects back up and fills them out really nicely. I'm just so stoked about the exposures I got with Arri Log C3 and with this little nanomorph. This was kind of a spur of the moment thing. I'm borrowing this lens from Laowa. I didn't even have an ND filter for it. It's a f2.2, so that's pretty fast. I stopped down to like a 5.6 or an 8, and I wanted wider depth of field just because it's actually really hard with this lens because you're looking at it's kind of a stretched image in the viewfinder. You can set the GH7 to de-squeeze the image, but it's just hard to tell in this little bitty viewfinder if you have critical focus. So, you know, I wanted a wide depth of field. It doesn't need to be super shallow. I knew that I don't need to make those kind of images. I'm never shooting wide open. It was still just hard to tell. You know, you just don't have the detail in the viewfinder or on the screen. My eyes just aren't good enough, even with reading glasses, to kind of tell if something's totally sharp and in focus. So I ended up like kind of looking at the scale on the lens and being like, okay, yeah, I'm about a meter away, and kind of, so somewhere in there I should have most everything in focus. That's how I did it. And you know what? Most of the time, mostly everything was in focus. It mostly worked out. A couple of shots were a little softer. The focus was not exactly where I would have preferred. Still works out just fine. I took all that footage, I gave it to Mark so he could cut it into a cold open for his little 20-minute yo-yo video that they're making, which I can't wait to see. And then I had, at the end of this, I actually rolled camera for like less than 45 minutes, ended up with 5.5 hours of footage. That's what happens when you shoot at 240 frames a second, people. I de-squeezed it and reconformed the time down to make it 24 frames a second. It stretched out in a timeline in Final Cut Pro to like 5.5 hours. Like, whoa, everything is so slow. But honestly, I freaking love how this looks. I love the colors right out of the camera. I put it in Final Cut Pro and I used an Arri LUT to get these colors. Just dropped a LUT right on it and boom, had to do very little other than that. I tweaked a couple shots kind of, you know, up and down just to kind of make, there was just some exposure variations and I wanted to make it match. I love being able to shoot Arri Log C3 and then just dropping these Arri LUTs on it and having so many cool options to just get amazing colors very, very easy. You hear about Arri color science and how cool it is. It's cool. It's freaking awesome that I can do that with this little bitty camera. So the film's on my website. I'll put a link in the description below. I hope you guys like it. It was something, you know, I just shot in an afternoon hanging out with an old friend, and you know, it took me a weekend to edit it together. I let it gestate. I kind of let it marinate for a while, came back, tuned it up, kind of tightened it up. Check it out. It's on my website, and I hope you like it. Overall, I'm just really stoked about this film. And I don't always say that about my work or my personal passion projects, you know. It was just awesome to be able to run out on an afternoon, spend a couple hours hanging out with an old friend, shoot some cool stuff, go back, cut it together, bada bing, bada boom. I just love what I can do with this little camera. And I got this tiny camera, this tiny anamorphic lens, shooting 240 frames a second. That's kind of nuts. Arri Log C3 have this amazing color science right in the camera. When I think back to like when I first moved here, when I first became friends with Mark and the technology we had then, and what we wished we could do and what you couldn't do, but we didn't really think about that. We're still like, wow, he had a Canon XL1 and I was like, wow, that's such an epic camera. Now this thing, it's so affordable, it's so powerful. Get out there and make something, you guys. It's so easy nowadays. I hope you get inspired by this. I hope you get like an itch to go make something. That's my whole motivation here. And if you don't like it, that's cool too. But for me, this scratches that itch. I want to go make something else. I love this. I love this so much. Thanks for watching. I've blabbed enough. Leave me a comment if you have any questions or you want to say hi or whatever. Thank you for liking the video and subscribing and all that stuff. Thank you for just tuning in to my goofy ass little channel. We'll see you real soon.
Yeah, back up a little bit. Back up, back up. Yes, that's the spot. Okay, hold on. I'll tell you when. Let me just get all my technical.